Have you ever felt like life keeps repeating itself? Like you are trapped in a cycle that never ends? What if everything you have been taught about reality, about life and death, was only a fragment of a far greater truth? Imagine for a moment that the world around you is not what it seems, that unseen forces are quietly guiding, controlling, and even trapping human souls in an endless loop. Could it be that the very system of life and death has been manipulated, so that your freedom is hidden behind layers of illusion? For centuries, mystics and Gnostic teachers warned that the material world we see is only a shadow of a higher reality. They spoke of powerful entities, often called the archons, who work under the Demiurge, a false god, whose sole purpose is to keep the divine spark inside each human soul bound, unaware and trapped in repeated cycles. Every desire, every fear, every attachment could be a part of the mechanism designed to make us forget our true selves. But what if there is a way out? What if the path to liberation, the key to finally breaking free from reincarnation and the Demiurge's trap, has always been within reach, hidden in plain sight, encoded in symbols, ancient teachings, and forgotten wisdom? Could you recognize it if it appeared before you? And more importantly, would you have the courage to take it? In this video, we will uncover secrets that have been buried for millennia. We will explore the hidden maps of consciousness, the ancient guides, and the tools that Gnostic teachers described as a way to reclaim your freedom. This is not just theory. This is a journey of awakening, a step toward understanding the very nature of your soul and its ultimate destiny. If you are ready to question everything you have been told and explore truths that have been deliberately hidden, subscribe to the channel now. Join us in uncovering the hidden revelations that challenge the rules of reality and illuminate the path to freedom. The exit has always been there. Now it is time to find it. For centuries, philosophers, mystics, and Gnostic sages have warned that the world we perceive is not the world in its true form. According to Gnostic teachings, the physical universe is a carefully constructed illusion, a place designed not for our freedom, but for our containment. This illusion is governed by the Demiurge, often misunderstood as a god in traditional religions, yet in truth, a false creator whose mission is to maintain control over human consciousness. The Demiurge is said to be blind to the higher realms of divine truth, focused instead on preserving a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. This cycle, known as reincarnation, keeps the soul bound to the material plane, distracting it from the knowledge of its true nature, its divine spark. Historical texts suggest that this knowledge was not always hidden. Ancient Gnostic manuscripts, such as those discovered at Nag Hammadi, speak of an eternal truth deliberately obscured by powerful entities. Some scholars believe that early religious institutions, while claiming to offer salvation, gradually distorted these teachings, shaping doctrines that reinforced attachment to the material world. In these writings, the archons, subordinate beings under the Demiurge, act as gatekeepers, intercepting those who might awaken too quickly, subtly influencing thoughts, desires, and fears. They are said to use everyday life as a mechanism to bind humans further, offering illusions of safety and success in exchange for ignorance. Symbols in ancient texts reveal the mechanics of this trap. The labyrinth, for instance, is not just a metaphor. It represents the complex web of distractions, attachments, and illusions that keep the soul wandering without direction. Sacred diagrams, often misunderstood as mere decoration, encode instructions for recognizing the hidden exit, a path of awareness, discernment, and liberation. The Gnostics called it Gnosis, direct, experiential knowledge of the divine self. They understood that intellectual understanding alone was not enough. The soul had to awaken from within, breaking the internal chains that the Demiurge and archons had placed long ago. The turning point of this revelation is both shocking and liberating. The Gnostics taught that the exit, the true path to freedom, is not somewhere in the distant heavens or in material conquest. It has always existed within the human soul itself. By cultivating awareness, questioning the narratives imposed upon us, and practicing discernment of the forces that shape our reality, one can begin to bypass the trap. Ancient rituals, meditative practices, and symbolic teachings were designed to guide the seeker toward this awakening, allowing the soul to recognize its divine origin. The insight is simple yet profound. The exit is not a place outside of us. It is a state of consciousness where the soul remembers its true home, its connection to the pleroma, the fullness of divine reality. Even today, these teachings are relevant. Every repetitive struggle, every cycle of pain or unfulfilled desire can be seen as a sign that the soul is still bound to the system designed by the Demiurge. The question for each of us becomes, how aware are we of the forces shaping our lives? Are we living under the influence of unseen powers, or are we beginning to recognize the patterns, the illusions, and the hidden doors leading to freedom? Reflect on your life for a moment. Are there moments when the world seems to be leading you in circles, when answers are always just out of reach? According to Gnostic thought, these are not coincidences. They are invitations to awaken, clues that point toward the path beyond the trap. Some viewers might feel this idea is unsettling. How can life itself, something so familiar, be a trap? But the power of this revelation lies in its possibility. The moment you recognize the pattern, you begin to reclaim agency. The exit was never lost. It was always there, waiting for those brave enough to question, to see beyond appearances, and to step into the unknown with courage. The journey is personal, but it is also universal, a call to all seekers who refuse to remain confined by the cycle of illusion. To truly understand the trap that has kept humanity bound for millennia, we must explore the historical evidence embedded in Gnostic texts and early mystical teachings. The Gnostics were not simply philosophers. They were seekers of hidden knowledge, chroniclers of truths deliberately obscured by both religious institutions and powerful unseen forces. Their writings, discovered in the mid-20th century at Nag Hammadi in Egypt, reveal a sophisticated spiritual cosmology that challenges the conventional narratives of creation and life. In these texts, the Demiurge is portrayed as a blind and arrogant craftsman, a false creator who believes himself to be the highest deity. Yet, in reality, he is only a lesser being, operating under the influence of ignorance and fear. The archons, as described in these manuscripts, serve as extensions of the Demiurge's will. They are guardians of the material world, manipulating human perception and emotion, often subtly, so that souls remain unaware of their divine essence. Some scholars interpret the archons as symbolic representations of human limitations, attachment, fear, and desire, while others see them as literal spiritual entities that actively interfere with consciousness. Regardless of interpretation, the Gnostics emphasized that awareness is the key to bypassing their influence. They described the archon's domain as a prison of appearances, a carefully constructed illusion that tricks the soul into accepting the material as the ultimate reality. Ancient writings also suggest that the cycle of reincarnation was not simply a cosmic law, but a deliberate system, maintained to strengthen the Demiurge's control. The soul, separated from the pleroma, the realm of divine fullness, is repeatedly reborn into the material plane, forced to navigate the illusions of the senses, societal expectations, and institutional doctrines that obscure spiritual truth. Every attachment to the material, every identification with the body or ego, strengthens the cycle and keeps the divine spark dormant. It is here that the Gnostic idea of Gnosis becomes critical. Knowledge, in this sense, is not intellectual. It is a direct, transformative awareness that allows the soul to perceive the higher reality beyond the Demiurge's deception. The Gnostics also encoded their teachings in symbols, rituals, and allegories. The serpent, for instance, is not merely a symbol of evil, as in many traditional interpretations. In Gnostic thought, it often represents wisdom and the awakening of consciousness. The labyrinth symbolizes the complexity of the material world, a maze designed to confuse and mislead. These symbolic maps were meant to guide the initiate, showing not only the obstacles that the Demiurge and Archons set before the soul, but also the pathways to liberation. Through careful observation, reflection, and inner practice, the seeker could recognize these hidden signs and gradually find the exit from the cycle of reincarnation. Even historical figures such as Valentinus, Basilides, and other early Gnostic teachers emphasized that the Demiurge's power lies not in his might, but in human ignorance. The institutions that followed, in many cases, inadvertently reinforced this ignorance by discouraging questioning, promoting blind faith, and concealing the ancient knowledge of liberation. It was not only the Archons or the Demiurge themselves, but the very structures of society and religion that became instruments of the cycle, keeping the majority of humanity unaware of their true spiritual potential. Today, these revelations may feel radical, even unsettling. If much of what we have been taught about reality, life, and death is incomplete or distorted, what does that mean for our choices, our understanding of ourselves, and our destiny? The Gnostics invite us to confront this uncertainty, to recognize the chains that bind us, and to seek the Gnosis that will open the hidden doors. They suggest that by awakening our awareness and discerning the patterns of the Archon's influence, we can begin to reclaim our freedom. The path is not easy, nor is it obvious, but it is always available, waiting for those who dare to look beyond appearances, to question everything, and to step into the knowledge that has been preserved through the ages. The Gnostic teachings were never meant to be mere stories or abstract philosophy. Every symbol, every allegory, and every ritual served a purpose: to awaken the divine spark within the human soul and guide it toward liberation from the Demiurge's trap. At the heart of these teachings is the concept of Gnosis, direct, experiential knowledge of the self and the divine. Unlike knowledge gained from books or sermons, Gnosis is an inner awakening, a recognition that the soul is not bound to the material world, that it originates from a higher, eternal reality, and that the cycles of suffering and rebirth can be transcended. Symbols were carefully encoded in the myths and texts of the Gnostics to serve as markers along this hidden path. The labyrinth, often appearing in Gnostic imagery, is not just a maze, but a representation of the challenges and distractions imposed by the material realm. The winding paths and dead ends symbolize the traps of ego, fear, and desire, all mechanisms used by the Demiurge and his Archons to keep the soul confused and unaware. Yet within the labyrinth, the Gnostics suggest, lies the possibility of awakening, small signs, hidden patterns, and inner revelations that, if recognized, can guide the seeker to the exit. Another powerful symbol is the serpent. In conventional religious interpretations, the serpent often represents temptation or evil, but the Gnostics understood it differently. The serpent symbolizes wisdom, enlightenment, and the awakening of consciousness. It is the guide that shows the way past the illusions of the material world. Some ancient texts describe the serpent as coiled around the divine spark inside every human being, a protective presence waiting to guide the soul when it is ready to seek truth. Recognizing and following this symbol, either literally through meditative focus or figuratively through ethical and spiritual discernment, becomes a crucial step toward liberation. Central to this awakening is the recognition of the divine spark itself. Every human soul, according to Gnostic thought, contains a fragment of the pleroma, the fullness of the divine. This spark is the true essence of our being, unbound by matter, time, or the illusions of the Demiurge. However, the Archons and the Demiurge seek to obscure this truth, encouraging attachment to worldly pleasures, fears, and rituals that do not lead to genuine understanding. The task of the seeker is to cultivate awareness of this inner light, to nurture it, and to understand that the spark is not separate from the higher reality, but a direct connection to it. The turning point of Gnostic practice lies in action, not just comprehension. The texts emphasize that liberation requires more than reading or reflection. It demands the conscious effort to discern truth from illusion in daily life, recognizing patterns of manipulation, questioning inherited beliefs, and observing one's own impulses are all methods of reclaiming agency over the soul. Through meditation, contemplation, and alignment with ethical principles, the soul begins to shed the layers of illusion imposed by the Demiurge and its archons. Every moment of awareness, every choice made from knowledge rather than ignorance, strengthens the path to freedom. Even in modern life, these teachings retain their relevance. Every repetitive cycle, every moment of internal conflict, can be viewed as a sign of the soul's entrapment. By understanding the symbolism encoded in ancient texts and awakening to the divine spark within, we begin to navigate life with clarity, consciously moving toward liberation rather than remaining trapped in the automatic cycles imposed by invisible powers. The Gnostics believed that the exit was never truly hidden. It has always existed as an inner state of awareness. The question is not whether it exists, but whether we have the courage and discernment to step into it and reclaim the freedom that has always been ours. After centuries of being bound to the cycles of birth, death, and rebirth, the Gnostics emphasized that liberation is possible, but only for those who recognize the patterns of control and act with awareness. This turning point, described in multiple ancient texts, is not a sudden miracle, but a gradual awakening, a process that begins the moment the soul questions its own reality. It starts with the realization that life is more than survival, ambition, or attachment to the material world. The repeated cycles, the disappointments, the endless search for fulfillment, all are signals that the soul is caught in the Demiurge's trap. Once this recognition occurs, the seeker begins to perceive life differently, discerning between what is real and what is an illusion. Historically, Gnostic teachers outlined specific markers along this path. Some texts describe visions, dreams, or meditative insights as windows into higher knowledge, where the soul briefly glimpses the pleroma, the fullness of divine reality. Other manuscripts suggest that ethical discernment and detachment from worldly attachments are equally important. The turning point, they argued, comes when the seeker learns to recognize the archon's influence not as a supernatural curse, but as a pattern within themselves and their surroundings. Every fear, desire, and habitual reaction becomes an opportunity to exercise awareness. When the soul begins to see these patterns clearly, it starts to weaken the chains of reincarnation. Because the cycles rely on unconscious repetition, awareness is the first and most crucial act of rebellion against the Demiurge. Symbols continue to play a critical role at this stage. Light, for example, represents knowledge, discernment, and the presence of the divine spark within. Many Gnostic texts describe the awakening soul as walking along a path illuminated from within, a path that grows brighter as awareness expands. Each symbol, ritual, or story encoded in ancient teachings is a guidepost pointing toward that inner illumination. The labyrinth of material life is not a prison forever. It is a map. The serpent of wisdom is not an enemy but a companion, guiding the seeker past pitfalls, revealing the hidden doors, and showing that the exit has always been present, waiting to be recognized. The Gnostics also warned that the turning point is not without struggle. The Demiurge and archons, while limited in ultimate power, actively attempt to prevent the soul from awakening. The influence is subtle. Attachments, fears, social pressures, and false teachings all reinforce ignorance. Some seekers report moments of deep disorientation when awakening begins, a sense that the world is both familiar and strangely distorted. This tension is not a failure. It is the soul shedding old patterns and preparing to step beyond the cycles. Reflection, courage, and persistence are essential. Each act of discernment, each moment of conscious choice, brings the soul closer to liberation. Importantly, the Gnostics emphasize the relevance of this awakening for daily life. This is not an abstract theory, but a practical path. By observing the forces that shape thoughts, relationships, and societal norms, the seeker begins to reclaim autonomy. Even in the modern world, moments of repetition, compulsion, or disillusionment can signal where attention is required. By consciously engaging with these patterns, recognizing the archon's influence, and nurturing the divine spark within, the soul steps closer to freedom. Reincarnation, once seen as inevitable, becomes a choice, and eventually, for the awakened, a cycle to transcend entirely. As you reflect on your own life, consider the moments when you felt stuck, controlled, or endlessly repeating mistakes. Could these be signs pointing toward a hidden path? Could the knowledge that the exit has always existed transform how you perceive your reality? The turning point is not distant. It begins the moment awareness dawns. The soul, once awakened, no longer walks blindly through the cycles imposed by the Demiurge. It recognizes that freedom was never lost. It was always within reach, waiting for those who dare to see and act. The Gnostic path to liberation is not theoretical. It is deeply practical. The teachings make clear that breaking free from the Demiurge's trap and escaping the cycles of reincarnation requires deliberate, conscious effort. It is a journey of awareness, discernment, and action, a step-by-step process that begins with observing life itself. Every pattern of repetition, every attachment to material comfort, and every automatic response is an opportunity to recognize the influence of the archons. Awareness is the foundation of freedom. Without it, even the wisest teachings remain merely words. Ancient texts suggest that the seeker's first practice is self-observation. The Gnostics often recommended meditation, contemplation, and journaling as tools to uncover the invisible chains that bind the soul. By reflecting on one's thoughts, desires, and emotional reactions, the individual begins to identify the ways in which the material world has shaped their understanding of reality. For example, attachments to status, possessions, or societal approval may seem natural, but they are often instruments of the Demiurge's design, keeping the soul focused outward and unaware of its inner divine essence. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward liberation. Another key aspect is the cultivation of Gnosis, or inner knowledge. This is not a philosophical study, but an experiential awakening. The Gnostics describe Gnosis as a light within the soul, a direct perception of truth that transcends belief and doctrine. Practices to cultivate this awareness include mindful observation, ethical living, and alignment with higher principles. Every decision, every action, becomes an exercise in reclaiming autonomy. When the soul consistently chooses awareness over ignorance, it strengthens the connection to the pleroma, the divine fullness from which it originated, and weakens the influence of the Demiurge. Symbols and rituals also play a practical role. The serpent, the labyrinth, and other Gnostic archetypes are more than metaphors. They are guides for the inner journey. Following the path of the serpent can involve seeking knowledge that challenges conventional thinking, questioning inherited beliefs, and engaging with mystical or meditative practices that reveal hidden layers of reality. Navigating the labyrinth means consciously discerning which attachments, fears, and illusions are holding the soul back and learning to move past them with deliberate intention. Each symbolic action reinforces the awareness that freedom is possible and that the cycles of reincarnation are not inevitable. The turning point often comes when the seeker experiences a shift in perception. When everyday life reveals hidden patterns, coincidences begin to appear as guidance, and the soul senses the possibility of choice rather than compulsion. The Gnostics emphasized that this awakening requires courage, for the Demiurge and Archons resist every step of liberation. The path is rarely easy. It may involve confronting uncomfortable truths about oneself, questioning long-held beliefs, and resisting societal pressures. Yet every act of awareness, every moment of discernment, diminishes the hold of the material system and brings the soul closer to freedom. In modern life, these practices remain accessible. Observing patterns of repetition, cultivating ethical awareness, and seeking inner knowledge are practical steps that anyone can take. Meditation, reflection on symbols, and mindful engagement with daily choices are methods to recognize the Archon's influence and reclaim agency. The soul, once awakened, begins to navigate life consciously, no longer a passive participant in cycles imposed by unseen forces. The exit, long hidden, is revealed in moments of clarity, insight, and deliberate action. Now, ask yourself, are you merely moving through life on autopilot, or are you willing to confront the illusions that shape your reality? Are you prepared to step beyond fear, desire, and habit to reclaim the divine spark within you? Every choice made in awareness is a step toward liberation. The tools have always been within reach, encoded in symbols, preserved in teachings, and whispered by the mystics throughout history. The journey is personal, but it is also universal, a call to every soul willing to awaken, to question, and to step into freedom. As we reach the heart of this revelation, it is time to confront the most profound truth. The chains that bind the soul are largely invisible because they are woven into the very fabric of everyday life. The Demiurge and his archons do not need to use brute force. They rely on subtle manipulation, encouraging attachment to pleasure, fear, and societal expectation. The cycle of reincarnation continues not because it is necessary, but because the majority of souls remain unaware of their divine origin. The turning point, then, is not a distant event. It is a conscious choice made in this moment, the decision to awaken, to recognize the patterns, and to reclaim the power that has always been yours. Gnostic texts describe this awakening as both liberating and disorienting. When the soul glimpses the pleroma, the fullness of divine reality, the illusions of the material world suddenly lose their grip. The attachments that once seemed essential appear as distractions. The fears that once controlled decisions dissolve into clarity, and the repetitive cycles of pain, desire, and unfulfilled longing begin to reveal themselves as invitations to awaken rather than punishments to endure. Some scholars interpret these experiences metaphorically as inner psychological shifts, while others insist they are literal spiritual awakenings. Either way, the transformative effect is undeniable. The soul begins to see the world not as a cage, but as a landscape full of hidden doors leading toward freedom. Symbols, once obscure, now come alive. The labyrinth becomes a map, not a trap. The serpent becomes a guide, not a threat. Every encounter, every challenge, and every reflection is an opportunity to move closer to liberation. The divine spark within, long overshadowed by ignorance and fear, shines brighter with each act of awareness. The Gnostics called this process self-recognition. The moment the soul remembers its true origin, sees the Demiurge for what it is, and steps beyond the cycles imposed upon it. It is the realization that life does not have to repeat endlessly, that death is not the end, but a gateway when understood correctly, and that the soul is capable of ascending beyond the material plane entirely. For the modern seeker, the relevance is immediate. Consider your own patterns, repeated mistakes, recurring fears, or the sensation that life keeps looping back on itself. These are not coincidences. They are signals pointing toward the path of awakening. By observing them, questioning inherited beliefs, and nurturing your inner divine spark, you can begin to bypass the trap. Each act of conscious choice, each moment of reflection, and each recognition of the subtle forces at work strengthens the soul and weakens the control of the Demiurge. Liberation is not a distant promise. It is an active process unfolding in the present. Now, pause for a moment and reflect. What would it mean for you to truly awaken? To see the patterns, recognize the Archon's influence, and reclaim your freedom from the cycles of reincarnation. The path is challenging, yes, but the reward is profound. A life lived with conscious awareness, no longer bound by illusions, and a soul fully reunited with its divine essence. The hidden path has always existed, preserved through symbols, texts, and teachings, waiting for those brave enough to seek it. Ask yourself and share in the comments. How aware are you of the forces shaping your life? Are you ready to step beyond the cycle, reclaim your inner power, and awaken to the reality that has been hidden from most of humanity? Reflect deeply, for this is the moment where choice meets destiny, and every soul willing to awaken begins to see the world in a completely new light. As we conclude this journey, it is clear that the path to liberation from the Demiurge's trap is not a myth, nor an abstract philosophy. It is a call to awareness, discernment, and action. The cycle of reincarnation, the unseen influence of the archons, and the deceptive power of the Demiurge are not merely ancient stories. They are reflections of patterns that shape our daily lives, our decisions, and even our deepest desires. The Gnostic texts and mystical traditions reveal that the exit has always been within reach. It exists as a recognition of the divine spark inside every human being, a spark that connects us directly to the pleroma, the fullness of divine reality. This knowledge invites you to see life through a new lens. Every repetitive struggle, every pattern of fear or attachment is an opportunity to awaken. Every moment of reflection, every conscious choice is a step closer to freedom. The Gnostics taught that liberation is achieved not by external forces, but by cultivating inner awareness, following the symbols, and reclaiming your true self from the illusions carefully constructed to distract you. The divine spark is your guide. Gnosis is the key. When you align your life with these principles, the cycles of reincarnation begin to lose their hold, and the soul can move toward the ultimate liberation that has been promised for millennia. But this awakening is not a solitary path. Sharing knowledge, discussing insights, and connecting with a community of seekers is essential to keeping these truths alive. By engaging with these hidden teachings, commenting, reflecting, and exchanging perspectives, you participate in a living tradition that defies the constraints of the material world. Your interaction is not just a casual choice. It is an act of preserving a sacred lineage of knowledge. Every question asked, every insight shared, strengthens the path for yourself and for others who seek to awaken. The cycle of ignorance can be broken not only individually, but collectively, through dialogue, curiosity, and courage. So, I invite you to take action now. Comment below with your reflections. Like this video if it opened new doors of understanding, and subscribe to the channel to continue exploring hidden revelations that have been deliberately obscured for centuries. Every subscription, every shared insight, and every discussion keeps this knowledge alive and accessible. By participating, you become part of a growing community of seekers, those who refuse to accept the surface illusion and are committed to discovering the hidden paths of truth. As you leave this video, reflect on these questions. How aware are you of the invisible forces shaping your life? How many cycles have you unknowingly repeated, and how might awakening change your path? What steps will you take today to recognize the divine spark within and begin reclaiming the freedom that has always been yours? The journey does not end here. Every day offers the opportunity to awaken further, to question deeper, and to step closer to the liberation that the Gnostics revealed long ago. Remember, the exit from the Demiurge's trap has never been lost. It has always been there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for those ready to awaken. The choice is yours. Will you take it? Will you join the path of conscious freedom and discover the truths that the material world has tried to conceal?